I had just brought my daughter to the swings when I noticed a woman staring at her little girl like the world was slipping away from her. She told me the child hadn't spoken a word since her father died. I leaned down, tried a few gentle words, and when my own daughter ran over to join her, suddenly, that silence finally broke. The sun was hanging low enough to soften the heat, spilling through the trees that lined our little town park. I had brought my daughter, Hannah, out for an afternoon at the playground, mostly because she had been bouncing off the walls at home. She's 7, full of energy, blonde hair flying wild no matter how many times I try to tame it. As soon as we stepped off the sidewalk, she took off toward the swings like she was shot out of a cannon. That's when I noticed her. On the swing beside the empty one Hannah was aiming for sat a girl about the same age, her brown hair drifting back with each gentle arc. She wasn't laughing or calling out like the rest of the kids, just swinging, quiet as could be, her eyes following the rhythm of the chains. A woman, maybe mid-30s, sat on a bench a few yards away. She had that posture I've seen before in parents who carry too much weight, sitting still but always braced for something. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her eyes never left the girl. I walked up to the swings with Hannah at my side. She was already talking a mile a minute, asking if I'd push her high enough to touch the sky. Before she could climb on, I glanced toward the quiet girl. "Mind if my daughter uses the swing next to you?" I asked gently. Her big eyes lifted toward me, curious but cautious. She didn't answer, just gave the smallest nod and went back to her silent rhythm. Hannah didn't notice the hesitation. She hopped up on the seat and started pumping her legs, grinning like she was taking flight. I squatted down, gave the other girl a small smile. "I'm Mark," I said, "and that chatterbox over there is Hannah." She tilted her head, studying me for a second. No words came, just a polite nod. "Pretty name you've got, huh?" Hannah called over to her, without waiting for an introduction. "I'm 7. How old are you?" The girl pressed her lips together and looked down, answering with nothing but a faint shrug. I didn't push. Kids have their own clocks, and the last thing they need is another adult filling the silence for them. Still, there was something about her, something fragile but strong at the same time. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the woman from the bench stand up, worry flickering across her face like she thought I might expect too much. I gave her a quick nod to let her know I wasn't going to force anything. She relaxed just a little, though the weight didn't leave her shoulders. Hannah kept swinging higher, giggling loud enough for both of them. "Dad, remember the trick?" "Show her the trick." I grinned at her, but my eyes drifted back to the quiet girl. She hadn't said a word, but I could feel her watching me closely now, almost like she wanted to know what this trick was about. That was the first spark. Small, but enough. Hannah leaned back on her swing, hair flying, and shouted, "Dad, do the cloud trick." "Show her." I laughed under my breath. That so-called trick had started as a joke one rainy afternoon, but to Hannah it was as serious as a magic spell. I turned back to the quiet girl and crouched down so I wasn't towering over her. "You want to know a secret?" I asked softly, like we were about to break some important rule. She hesitated, then gave me the slightest nod. "The thing about swings," I said, "is that you're not just swinging. You're flying through clouds. And every cloud makes a sound when you pass through it. Some whoosh, some hum, some whisper." Hannah kicked her legs and demonstrated. "Whoosh," she hollered, making it sound like a jet engine. The quiet girl's lips tugged into the smallest smile. It wasn't much, but it was the first sign that she wasn't lost in her own world. I exaggerated a deep breath and joined in, dragging out a soft, airy sound. Whoosh, whoosh, like the wind rolling through the sky. Hannah jumped right in, adding giggles and nonsense about rainbow clouds. The girl's eyes lit with interest. She didn't laugh, but her gaze followed me like she wanted to. I leaned in a little closer. "You know, sometimes it's hard to make a sound the first time," I told her gently. "Want to see a trick that helps?" From my pocket, I pulled out a smooth little stone I'd picked up on a trip to the coast years ago. Nothing special, but polished by the waves until it shined like it held something secret. I held it out on my palm. "This is my magic stone," I whispered. "When you hold it, any sound you make, big or small, turns into flying power, even if it's just a whisper." She looked at the stone like it might actually glow. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and curled her small fingers around it. "Close your eyes," I said. "Take a deep breath. Don't think too hard. Just let whatever sound wants to come out, come out." For a moment, the only noise was Hannah's whooshing and the creak of the chains. Then, So faint I almost missed it, the girl whispered. Whoosh. Her voice was fragile, thin as a thread of air, but it was a voice. I felt her mother's breath catch behind me, and when I turned my head, she had her hand clamped over her mouth, eyes wide with tears. The girl tried again, louder this time, gripping the stone like it really was magic. Whoosh! Hannah squealed and clapped. She's flying too. Dad, she's flying. The sound carried more weight than anyone else at that park could possibly understand. And in that moment, watching her break through her silence, I knew I'd just witnessed something her mother had been praying for. The girl was still clutching the stone, swinging gently, whispering whoosh every few breaths like she was testing out her own strength. Hannah egged her on, loud and fearless, filling in the space with enough laughter for both of them. Behind me, I heard quick steps on the gravel path. Her mother was rushing over now, tears already slipping down her face. She crouched by the swing, eyes locked on her daughter like she was afraid to blink and lose the moment. Mia, she whispered, her voice shaking. Sweetheart, you're talking. The little girl looked at her mom, then at me, then back at the stone in her hand. Mama, she said, just a little shaky but clear enough to stop the air in my lungs. The woman broke. She pulled her daughter into her arms, squeezing her so tight the chains rattled. I hear you, baby. I hear you, she kept saying, like she needed to prove it wasn't a dream. I stepped back, giving them space. It wasn't my moment, it was theirs. After a while, the woman stood, brushing tears off her cheeks, but her hands were still trembling. She turned to me, her eyes red but sharp with gratitude. I don't know how you did that, she said, her voice breaking. You just gave me back my little girl. I shook my head. I didn't do anything special. She was ready. She just needed to know it was safe. Her throat worked as she tried to form words. Finally, she just whispered, "Thank you." I could feel the weight of that thank you. It wasn't casual, it wasn't polite. It carried every sleepless night, every appointment with specialists, every desperate prayer. I didn't know her story, but I didn't need the details to recognize that kind of exhaustion. Hannah came running over, out of breath from swinging too high. Dad, did you hear? She's flying clouds now too. That made Mia smile again, this time a real one, unguarded. For the first time, her silence didn't feel like a wall. It felt like maybe she'd found a crack in it big enough to step through. The woman looked at me one more time, softer now. I'm Rachel, she said quietly. And this is Mia. I nodded. Mark. And that blur of blonde energy is Hannah. For a second, the four of us just stood there, two parents, two kids, the air between us changed by something that couldn't be undone. After that afternoon, things didn't just go back to normal. Rachel and Mia started showing up at the park more often, and somehow, Hannah and I always seemed to end up there around the same time. At first I figured it was coincidence, but eventually Rachel admitted she planned it that way. Mia had started asking to see the cloud swings, and Rachel wasn't about to deny her. The girls clicked fast. Hannah was loud, fearless, and always full of ideas. Games, stories, pretend adventures. Mia was quieter, but she followed Hannah's lead with a kind of steady eagerness, like she'd been waiting for someone to pull her into the noise of childhood again. It was like watching two puzzle pieces snap into place. For me and Rachel, it started simple. Small talk on the benches, sharing snacks, swapping kid stories. I noticed how often she checked Mia, like her daughter might slip back into silence if she looked away too long. I didn't tell her to relax. I just tried to keep things easy. No pressure, no questions she didn't want to answer. One afternoon, while the girls were chasing each other across the grass, Rachel finally asked, "How did you know what to say to her that day?" I shrugged. I didn't. I work as a music therapist, mostly with kids. I've learned that sometimes they don't need fixing, they just need a safe space to try again. Her eyes lingered on me, like she was weighing whether to believe me or chalk it up to luck. You make it sound simple, she said. It isn't, I answered honestly. But believing in a little magic doesn't hurt. She smiled at that, the first real smile I'd seen from her that wasn't tangled with worry. It made her look younger, lighter. Over the weeks, the routine became something I didn't realize I needed. Hannah had a new best friend, and I found myself talking more than I had in years, about life, about raising kids alone, about the things no one else really wants to hear. Rachel listened, really listened. And when she talked about the accident, about how Mia hadn't spoken since the night her father died, I didn't try to offer answers. I just sat with it. There was no grand moment, no confession of feelings, just the steady sense that the four of us fit together in a way that felt right. And every time Mia whispered whoosh under her breath, a little louder than the time before, I caught Rachel watching me with that same look of quiet gratitude. Not every day was a victory. Some afternoons Mia would chatter a little with Hannah, making soft whooshing sounds on the swings or whispering silly lines during their games. Other days she'd shut down completely, her shoulders tight, her lips pressed together like she was locking the words inside. Rachel always noticed before anyone else. She'd stiffen, start apologizing, like Mia's silence was something she owed the world an explanation for. One time, when Mia refused to say a word all afternoon, Rachel sighed and muttered, "It feels like we're right back at the beginning." I shook my head. "You're not. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days are just quieter. That's okay." She looked at me, tired but listening, and I could tell she wanted to believe it. Hannah helped in her own way. She didn't treat Mia like she was fragile. If Mia didn't answer, Hannah filled the space anyway, babbling about school, or clouds, or what she wanted for her birthday. It was noisy and messy, but it gave Mia room to just exist without pressure. Sometimes I think Hannah's chatter was more therapy than anything I could offer. The more time we spent together, the more Rachel started to open up too. Not in a dramatic way, just little things. She'd talk about her firm, about late nights balancing work and parenting, about how she still set a place at the table some evenings out of habit. She admitted she hated weekends because they made her feel the most alone. I didn't push. I just listened, the way I did with Mia. Sometimes, listening is the only thing that makes the weight bearable. For me, those afternoons became more than just a routine. I wasn't just the dad keeping his daughter busy. I was part of something that felt like it mattered. And each time Mia spoke, whether it was a single word or a string of them, I could see Rachel breathe a little easier, like she was finally letting herself believe her daughter's voice wasn't gone forever. 6 months slipped by faster than I realized. By then, seeing Rachel and Mia at the park wasn't an occasional thing, it was part of our lives. Hannah and Mia were practically glued together, and Rachel and I had settled into an easy rhythm that felt natural. Then came the school recital. The auditorium smelled of crayons and floor wax, the kind of scent you only find in elementary schools. Parents filled the rows, cameras ready, whispering to each other while kids in bright costumes milled around the stage curtain. Hannah was bouncing with excitement, her hair pulled into a crooked braid. Mia stood beside her, gripping her hand, nervous but steady. Rachel sat next to me, twisting her program into folds, her knuckles white. "She hasn't spoken in front of anyone but us," she whispered. "She doesn't have to be perfect," I said quietly. "Just being up there is enough." When the lights dimmed and the kids filed onto the stage, my chest tightened. Hannah and Mia were paired for a duet, something about butterflies and sunshine, a simple song with a few verses. Hannah stepped right up to the microphone, fearless as ever. Mia hung back a half step, eyes wide under the stage lights. For a breathless moment, I thought she might freeze. Then I saw her fingers brush the little stone she still kept in her pocket, the one I'd given her months before. And she sang. Her voice was soft at first, like she was testing the air. But it carried, clear, steady, and unmistakably hers. By the second verse, she was louder, her tone blending with Hannah's like they'd been practicing for years. Rachel's hand shot to her mouth, tears spilling before the song even ended. I felt my own throat tighten, and for once, I didn't try to hide it. When the last note faded and the kids bowed, the applause was thunderous. Mia looked out into the crowd, her face glowing, and for the first time, she didn't look like a girl hiding behind silence. She looked like a kid who belonged on that stage. Rachel turned to me, eyes shining through her tears. "I used to think losing her voice was the worst thing that could have happened after we lost her dad," she said. I reached over, covering her trembling hand with mine. "And now?" She looked back at Mia, who was grinning at Hannah like they'd just conquered the world. Rachel's smile broke through the tears. "Now I think maybe she had to lose it first, just so she could learn what she really wanted to say." When the recital ended, the kids spilled off the stage into the arms of waiting parents. Hannah barreled straight toward me, nearly knocking the wind out of my chest as she wrapped me in a hug. Right behind her, Mia launched herself into Rachel's arms, laughing and breathless. her voice carrying clear as a bell as she shouted, "Mama, did you hear me?" Rachel was crying too hard to answer at first, but she finally whispered, "I heard you, sweetheart." Every word. I stood there watching them, my daughter tucked against my side, her new best friend clinging to her mom, and it hit me how much had changed since that first afternoon at the park. Back then, Mia was silent, Rachel was all worry and wait, and I was just another dad killing time with his kid on the swings. Now we were something else, something bigger than just two families crossing paths. As the crowd funneled toward the doors, Rachel and I fell into step together, the girls holding hands and skipping ahead. She glanced at me, her eyes still red from crying, but softer than I'd ever seen them. "You know," she said, "I don't think I've ever believed in magic stones until now." I chuckled. The stone was never magic. She just needed a reason to try. Rachel smiled, the kind of smile that sticks. Sometimes that's all any of us need, isn't it? Outside, the evening air was cool, carrying the smell of fresh-cut grass. The girls were still buzzing with excitement, talking over each other about how they'd nailed it. Rachel and I just walked behind them in silence, comfortable in the kind that doesn't need filling. I thought about how easily we could have missed this, how one small decision, one trip to the park, had changed the course of things. Sometimes the biggest shifts don't come from grand plans. They come from being present at the exact moment someone needs you most. As we reached the parking lot, Hannah called back, tugging Mia along. "Come on, we're not done flying yet." Rachel laughed through her tears, and I felt something settle inside me. Something steady, something hopeful. We walked out together, two daughters skipping ahead, two parents trailing behind, and for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel so heavy. It felt like a beginning.